usually the kind of person who rolls their eyes at ghost stories. I don't believe in the supernatural, haunted houses, or anything that can't be explained with logic and evidence. If something sounds too strange, I assume it's exaggerated or made up. That's why what happened to me a few weeks ago has left me completely shaken. I still can't find any rational answer, and the fear lingers even now. Maybe writing this down and sharing it will help someone else make sense of it, or at least let me sleep better at night. My friend Alex and his wife Sarah had been planning a romantic weekend getaway for their anniversary. They live in a large, modern house built on the outskirts of a quiet town called Elmwood, far from the busy city noise. The place sits on several acres of wooded land, giving them the privacy they love. They have 2 young children and a lively golden retriever named Max. Normally, leaving the house empty wasn't an option, but this time, everything aligned perfectly. The kids were away on a school camping trip, so Alex asked if I could pet sit Max for the weekend. I happily agreed. It sounded like a relaxing break, a big house all to myself, plenty of food stocked in the fridge, and a friendly dog for company. What could go wrong? I arrived on Friday afternoon. Alex gave me a quick tour, showed me where everything was, and reminded me about Max's routine: walks in the yard, meals twice a day, and lots of playtime. The house felt warm and welcoming in the daylight, with big windows overlooking the trees. After they left, Max and I settled in. We watched movies on the big living room TV, shared some snacks, and played fetch outside until the sun went down. Around 9 p.m., Alex texted me, "Don't get spooked out there alone. The woods can feel eerie at night." I laughed it off and replied with a joke, "I'm not the type to scare easily. Empty houses don't bother me." I decided to sleep in the guest bedroom upstairs. Max followed me up and curled up on the rug beside the bed. We both drifted off around 1 a.m. Then, at exactly 3:21 a.m., I jolted awake to loud, aggressive barking coming downstairs. It wasn't ordinary barking. It was deep, frantic, almost desperate. My heart raced from the sudden noise. I grabbed my phone for light and hurried down the stairs. Max was in the kitchen, facing the closed basement door. His fur stood straight up along his back, and he looked terrified, eyes wide and body tense. He didn't stop barking no matter how much I called his name or tried to calm him. I felt a chill run through me. Could someone have broken in? The house had a good security system, but you never know. I picked up a large kitchen knife for safety and slowly approached the basement door. As soon as my hand touched the knob, Max went wild, running back and forth, growling and whining. I opened the door, flipped on the lights, and yelled loudly, trying to sound intimidating. "Who's down there? Come out!" Nothing. No sounds, no movement. Max stayed at the top of the stairs, refusing to follow me down. He just growled from the doorway, hair still raised. The basement was finished nicely. Carpeted floors, a home gym area, a small bathroom, and storage closets. I searched everywhere, behind furniture, in every corner, even the bathroom. No one was there. But something felt off. The air was unusually cold, much colder than the rest of the house, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. I'd been in this basement many times before, and it had never felt like this, even in winter. After checking thoroughly, I gave up and went back upstairs. It took nearly an hour for Max to calm down. We ended up sleeping on the living room couch for the rest of the night. The next day, everything seemed normal. Max was his usual playful self. We went for a long walk around the property, played in the yard, and relaxed with movies. I even went down to the basement during the afternoon to grab some snacks from storage. The temperature felt completely ordinary, no cold spot at all. I shrugged off the previous night as maybe an animal outside or Max hearing something in the woods. Dogs have sharp senses after all. I decided to stay on the couch again that evening, just in case. I fell asleep watching a film. Then, around the same time, 3:20 a.m., Max erupted again. This time, the barking was even more intense, almost panicked. He was back at the basement door, going absolutely crazy. I tried to soothe him, but he ignored me completely. When I reached for the doorknob, instead of barking louder, he started whimpering and crying like he was in pain. It was heartbreaking and strange. I let go of the knob, and he barked again. Confused and annoyed, I opened the door anyway and headed down. Max wouldn't follow. He stayed at the top, crying softly. The basement was ice cold once more, but this time there was a horrible smell, thick, rotten, like spoiled meat mixed with something sour and old. It made me gag. Worse, some family photos on the wall were knocked over, and a couple of bar stools by the counter lay on the floor. Nothing else was damaged or missing. I quickly set things upright, but the stench was overwhelming. I didn't want to stay down there another second. Back upstairs, Max continued barking for about half an hour before finally settling with a treat and some petting. In the morning, the smell had completely disappeared, not even a trace. Max happily followed me down to the basement without hesitation, wagging his tail like nothing had happened. 2 nights of terror, and now he acted like it was just another day. By Sunday morning, I was exhausted, but relieved that the weekend was almost over. Alex and Sarah were due back in the early afternoon. I spent the morning cleaning up a bit, taking Max for one last long walk around the property, and trying to act like everything was normal. The basement? I avoided it completely that day. Max seemed perfectly happy, chasing squirrels in the yard, begging for treats, and napping in the sunbeams coming through the big living room windows. It was as if those 2 terrifying nights had never happened. When Alex pulled into the driveway, Max went ballistic with joy, jumping all over him and Sarah. They both looked refreshed from their getaway. I tried to play it cool at first, chatting about how much food they had left me and how great the house was. But Alex could tell something was off. After Sarah took Max outside to play, he pulled me aside in the kitchen and asked straight up what was wrong. I told him everything. The frantic barking at exactly 3:21 a.m. both nights, the unnatural cold in the basement, the horrible rotting smell on the second night, the knocked over pictures and stools. I described how Max refused to go down there with me, but acted completely normal during the day. Alex listened without interrupting, his face growing paler with each detail. When I finished, he didn't laugh or call me crazy, he just stared at the floor for a long moment. Finally, he spoke quietly. Max did this when he was a puppy. A lot. He'd go absolutely nuts at that basement door around the same time every night. We thought it was just separation anxiety or something in the woods outside, but it stopped completely after about 6 months. He hasn't done it in years. Alex rubbed his face, looking more shaken than I felt. "I'm really sorry, man." We talked for another 20 minutes. Sarah joined us later, and they both seemed genuinely disturbed. They promised to have someone check the basement thoroughly, maybe an electrician for wiring issues, or even a pest control expert for animals. But we all knew that didn't explain the smell, the cold spots that came and went, or why Max's behavior flipped so dramatically between night and day. I left their house that afternoon feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. Relief that I was going back to my own apartment in the city, unease because I couldn't stop replaying those nights in my head. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept in touch with Alex. He said Max had been completely normal since they returned. No more barking fits, no strange behavior at the basement door. The house felt ordinary again. But Alex admitted he now double-checked the locks every night and had started leaving lights on downstairs. That should have been the end of it for me, but the experience stuck with me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I'm still the skeptical type who doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits, yet every time I close my eyes around 3 a.m., I hear that desperate barking in my mind. What was Max trying to warn us about? Why did the smell disappear by morning? And why did those objects get moved only at night? A few months later, I moved into a new place to clear my head, a quiet apartment complex called Willow Grove on the edge of town. It was a nice, modern building with a beautiful shared courtyard. After the dog-sitting incident, I wanted somewhere with more neighbors nearby, less isolation. The apartment was on the ground floor, with windows facing the courtyard. At first, everything felt peaceful. I made friends with a few neighbors, enjoyed the quiet evenings, and slowly forgot about the basement mystery. But then, the strange sounds started. It began with what I thought was kids running in the hallway late at night. I'd hear quick footsteps, almost playful, around 1 or 2 a.m. I'd peek through the door's viewer, but see nothing. No kids lived in my building. Most residents were young professionals or older couples. I shrugged it off. Maybe visitors or someone visiting family. A week later, things escalated. One night, I woke up to soft giggling right outside my bedroom window. It sounded like 2 small children playing. Annoyed, but not scared, I tapped on the glass and shushed loudly. The giggling stopped briefly. Then came a faint tapping on the window from the other side, like little fingers testing the glass. My heart jumped. I yanked the curtain open, ready to scare off some pranksters. The courtyard was empty, dead silent under the moonlight. No one in sight, no place they could have hidden that fast. I stood there for a full minute, staring out, feeling a chill I hadn't felt since the basement nights. The giggling returned a few more nights. I ignored it, figuring it would stop if I didn't react. Then came the email from the building manager, Mrs. Elena. She asked me to stop by the office urgently after work. When I arrived, she locked the door, spoke in a hushed tone, and showed me security footage with the security guard present. The video was from the hallway camera outside my door, timestamped around 2 a.m. 2 small, hooded figures, about the size of 10 or 12-year-old kids, stood incredibly close to my apartment door. They didn't move for nearly 10 minutes, just stood there. Then one reached out, tried the doorknob, jiggling it. They eventually skipped away and vanished from all other cameras. No trace of where they went. The building requires a key fob to enter after hours. There were no kids in my section. I told them about the window sounds. They checked courtyard footage. Nothing there either. That night, I stayed up, determined to catch them. Nothing happened. But a week later, around 1:30 a.m., I heard the doorknob rattling. Then a child's voice whispered through the door. "Mom, we're home. Open the door and let us in." Another voice joined, soft and pleading. "Please, we're home now." I yelled that this wasn't their home and threatened to call the police. They giggled, then started throwing themselves against the door. I held it shut, terrified. After a minute, silence. When I checked the peephole, the hallway was empty. The police came, took a report, but assumed it was local kids pranking. The manager later pulled me aside in the parking lot. She looked uncomfortable and whispered that the previous tenant, a woman, had something horrible happen with her children. She wouldn't say more for privacy reasons, but warned me it wasn't a prank and to keep my doors locked. I moved out a couple months later. To this day, I can't explain how those kids got inside the secured building or disappeared from cameras. The more time passes, the more it connects in my mind to that basement with Max. Unexplainable warnings at night, things that shouldn't be there, a feeling of something watching. After moving out of Willow Grove Apartments, I thought distance would help me forget. I found a small one-bedroom rental in an older neighborhood called Oak Ridge, about 30 minutes outside the city. The house was a converted duplex owned by an elderly couple who lived next door. It had a small backyard, creaky wooden floors, and a finished attic that the landlord used for storage. The rent was cheap, the neighbors quiet, and most importantly, no children, no dogs, and no basements. I needed normalcy. For the first 3 weeks, everything was peaceful. I worked from home, cooked simple meals, and went to bed early. The only odd thing was how cold the attic stairs felt whenever I passed them, even in the middle of summer. I told myself it was just poor insulation in an old building. Then the dreams started. They were always the same. I was standing in a long, narrow hallway that looked like a mix of Alex's basement and the Willow Grove corridor. At the far end, two small figures in hoods waited silently. Behind them, a golden retriever barked desperately, trying to warn me. Every time I tried to run toward the dog, the hallway stretched longer. The children's voices would whisper, "We're home. Why won't you let us in?" I always woke up sweating at exactly 3:21 a.m., the same time Max had gone crazy. One Thursday night, the dream felt too real. I woke up gasping and heard faint scratching sounds coming from above my bedroom ceiling, right where the attic was. It sounded like tiny nails on wood, back and forth, almost rhythmic. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and climbed the narrow attic stairs. The air grew colder with every step. When I reached the top, the scratching stopped instantly. The attic was mostly empty except for some old boxes belonging to the landlord. I swept the light around. Nothing. But on the dusty floor near the far wall, I noticed small footprints, barefoot, child-sized, leading from the center of the room toward the wall and then vanishing. My skin crawled. I told myself it could be mice or raccoons, but the prints looked too human, too clear. I went back downstairs, locked my bedroom door, and slept with the lights on. The next morning, I spoke to Mrs. Harper, the landlady. She was in her late 70s, always kind and chatty. When I casually mentioned hearing scratching in the attic, her smile faded. She looked down at her garden gloves and said quietly, "We don't go up there much anymore. Not since the previous tenant left." She changed the subject quickly and offered me fresh tomatoes from her garden. I didn't push. That weekend, I installed a cheap security camera in my bedroom facing the attic door, just for peace of mind. The first 2 nights showed nothing. On the third night, the camera captured something I still can't explain. At 3:19 a.m., the camera recorded the attic door slowly creaking open by itself. No one was visible. Then came soft footsteps on the wooden stairs, slow, deliberate, like a child trying to make no noise. The footsteps stopped right outside my closed bedroom door. For 43 seconds, the camera showed nothing but an empty hallway. Then the doorknob turned slightly left and right, testing. It never opened because I'd locked it, but the rattling was clear. After that, the footsteps retreated back up the stairs and the attic door closed on its own. I watched the video at least 20 times. No drafts, no windows open, no logical reason for any of it. I showed it to a friend who works in tech. He confirmed the camera was functioning normally and had no signs of tampering. The scratching sounds grew bolder after that. Sometimes I heard giggling mixed with it, the same light, playful giggling from Willow Grove. One night, I even heard a child's voice humming an old lullaby right above my bed. I banged on the ceiling with a broom and shouted it to stop. The humming paused, then continued even louder, almost mocking me. I started sleeping on the couch in the living room with the TV on. Exhaustion was setting in. Work suffered. I began drinking coffee late into the night just to avoid falling asleep before sunrise. Then came the night everything peaked. It was a Tuesday, around 3:20 a.m. I had finally dozed off on the couch when I heard Max barking, not in a dream, but clear and loud, as if the golden retriever was right outside my front door. I sat up, heart pounding. The barking grew frantic, exactly like those nights in Elmwood. I grabbed a baseball bat and rushed to the door. When I looked through the peephole, there was nothing on the porch, but the barking continued, now sounding like it was coming from inside the house, from the direction of the attic stairs. I turned around slowly. At the bottom of the attic staircase stood two small, hooded figures holding hands. They were completely still, facing me. Even in the dim light from the street lamp outside, I could see their outlines clearly. One of them raised a small hand and waved slowly, like a child saying hello. I yelled and swung the bat wildly. The figures didn't move. Instead, the golden retriever's barking turned into painful whimpering, the same sound Max made when he didn't want me to open the basement door. Then, in perfect unison, the two children whispered, "He can't protect you here." The front door behind me suddenly unlocked and swung open by itself. Cold air rushed in. When I turned back, the figures were gone. The attic door was wide open at the top of the stairs. I ran out of the house in my pajamas, barefoot, and didn't stop until I reached the nearest 24-hour gas station. I called the Harpers from there, voice shaking, begging them to meet me. When they arrived, I showed them the latest camera footage. Mrs. Harper's face went white. She finally admitted the truth. The previous tenant was a single mother who had lost both her young children in a tragic house fire years earlier, in the very same attic where they had been sleeping. The mother had survived, but moved away broken. The children's bodies were found holding hands. The landlord had tried to seal the attic after that, but things had never felt right since. Mr. Harper drove me to a motel that night and paid for the room himself. He said they would understand if I wanted to break the lease. I never went back inside that house to collect my things. A friend picked them up for me during daylight hours. Even now, months later, sometimes I wake up at 3:21 a.m. hearing distant barking mixed with soft giggling. Whatever is happening doesn't seem to stay in one place. It follows when something or someone wants to be noticed. And it always happens at the same hour, when the line between our world and whatever waits on the other side grows thinnest. I spent the next 2 weeks in that cheap motel on the highway, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. The Harpers were kind enough to refund my deposit and even helped my friend pack my belongings. I told almost no one what really happened, only that the house had structural issues. Deep down, I knew the truth was far darker. Whatever had followed me from Alex's basement to Willow Grove and then to the Oak Ridge duplex wasn't tied to a single building. It was attached to me now. I decided to make one last attempt at a fresh start. A friend of a friend offered me a short-term house sit in a lakeside cabin about 2 hours north, in a small vacation town called Pine Hollow. The owners were an older couple wintering in Florida. The cabin was modern, fully furnished, with huge windows overlooking a quiet lake. No basement, no attic, just one floor, open layout, and plenty of natural light. It felt safe, remote, but safe. I arrived on a sunny Monday afternoon. The place smelled of pine and fresh linen. I unpacked lightly, stocked the fridge, and sat on the deck watching the water. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. Maybe the nightmare was finally over. I even laughed at myself for believing something supernatural had been chasing me. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no 3:21 a.m. wake-ups. The peace lasted exactly 4 nights. On the 5th night, I woke to the sound of splashing in the lake. It was past 3 a.m. I walked to the window and saw 2 small figures standing at the end of the wooden dock, silhouetted against the moonlight on the water. They looked like children, maybe 10 or 11 years old, wearing hoodies despite the cold. One of them waved at me, the same slow wave I had seen in the duplex hallway. My blood ran cold. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the deck. "Hey, who's there?" I shouted. The figures turned and ran along the dock, then jumped into the lake without a splash. I ran down to the water's edge, heart hammering. The surface was perfectly still. No ripples, no bubbles, nothing. Back inside, I locked every door and window. That's when I noticed the temperature had dropped sharply. My breath fogged in the air. The cabin's heating was on full blast, yet it felt like a freezer. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, phone in hand, ready to call someone, anyone. That's when the barking started. It was Max's bark. I would recognize it anywhere. Deep, urgent, protective. It came from the direction of the bedroom. I crept down the short hallway and froze. On the bed, where I had been sleeping, lay a large golden retriever, but it wasn't real. Its fur shimmered unnaturally, almost translucent. The dog looked straight at me with sad, knowing eyes and barked once more, a clear warning. Then it slowly faded away like smoke. I stood there shaking. The room smelled faintly of rot, the same stench from Alex's basement. The next morning, I called Alex. He picked up on the second ring. When I told him where I was and what was happening, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Sarah found some old newspaper clippings when we renovated the basement last month. There was a fire in that house 20 years before we bought it. A mother and her 2 kids. They didn't make it out of the basement playroom. The dog at the time tried to save them, but died too. We never told anyone because we didn't want to scare the kids. Everything clicked into place in the worst way. The cold spots, the smell, the children who said they were home, the golden retriever trying to protect me. It wasn't multiple separate hauntings. It was the same tragedy following me, reaching out through different places and different forms. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the deck with every outdoor light on, wrapped in blankets. Around 3:20 a.m., the lake water began to glow faintly. 2 small heads broke the surface near the dock. They didn't swim, they walked on the water, hand in hand, coming straight toward the cabin. Behind them, a large dog shape trotted on the surface, barking silently. I ran inside, locked the sliding glass door, and backed into the kitchen. The figures reached the deck. They stood there staring through the glass, pale faces, dark, hollow eyes. One of them placed a small hand on the door and whispered loud enough for me to hear through the glass, "We just want to come inside. It's cold out here." I screamed at them to leave me alone. The other child smiled sadly and said, "You opened the door before. In the basement, in the hallway, in the attic. You always open the door." The golden retriever appeared beside them, scratching desperately at the glass, trying to keep them back. For a moment, the children looked angry. The temperature plummeted so fast that frost formed on the inside of the windows. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they stepped backward and sank into the lake again. The dog gave me one last look, almost apologetic, before fading. I left the cabin at sunrise. I didn't even pack my clothes. I drove straight back toward the city, stopping only for gas. My hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. Now I live in a small studio on the 7th floor of a busy downtown building. Lots of people, lots of noise, bright lights. I thought height and crowds would protect me, but last night at 3:21 a.m., I woke to soft scratching on my window. I live on the 7th floor. There is no balcony, no fire escape near my unit. When I pulled the curtain aside, 2 small handprints were pressed against the glass from the outside, and far below on the street, I could hear a golden retriever barking desperately, trying to warn anyone who would listen. I didn't stay in the downtown studio long. After the handprints on the 7th floor window, I knew running wouldn't work. Whatever this was had already followed me across houses, apartments, cabins, and floors. It didn't need doors or stairs. It only needed me to remember. I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the beginning. 2 months after the lake incident, I drove to Elmwood again. Alex and Sarah had sold the big house and moved to another state. The new owners were a young family with no idea what they had bought. I parked across the street at dusk and just stared at the place. The basement windows glowed with warm light. A different golden retriever played in the yard with 2 small children. The sight made my chest tighten. I had spent weeks researching the old tragedy. The fire happened in 2004. The mother's name was Claire. Her children were Emily, age 9, and Lucas, age 7. Their dog, Bailey, a golden retriever, had tried to drag them out, but the smoke was too thick. All 3 died in the finished basement playroom. The father had been away on a business trip. He never recovered and eventually took his own life years later. I found Claire's surviving sister on social media. After several messages, she agreed to meet me at a quiet coffee shop in the next town. Her name was Rachel. When I told her my story, the barking, the cold, the children asking to come inside, the dog trying to protect me, she didn't look surprised. She looked exhausted, like someone who had carried this weight for 20 years. "They never crossed over," she said quietly, stirring her untouched coffee. Claire was a good mother, but she was strict. The night of the fire, the kids had been punished and locked in the basement playroom for drawing on the walls. They were scared of the dark. Bailey was their only comfort. I think they're still waiting for someone to open the door and let them out. They're not evil. They're just lost children who want to go home. She slid an old photograph across the table. It showed Emily and Lucas smiling, holding hands, with Bailey sitting proudly between them. The same slow wave, the same gentle faces I had seen in every dark hallway and on every frozen lake. I asked her what I should do. "Stop running," she whispered. "Give them what they've been asking for. Let them in. Tell them it's okay to leave." That night, I returned to the empty street in front of the old house. The new owners were away for the weekend. I had checked. I stood at the edge of the property near the basement windows and spoke softly into the darkness. "Emily, Lucas, Bailey, I'm here. The door is open now. You can come out. Your mom isn't angry anymore. It's time to go home." The air grew ice cold. I smelled the faint rot again, but this time it was mixed with something sweeter, like children's shampoo and wet dog fur. From inside the dark basement, I heard soft giggling, then the familiar, desperate barking, but gentler this time, almost relieved. 2 small figures appeared behind the basement glass. They pressed their hands against it, smiling. Bailey stood behind them, tail wagging slowly. For the first time, he wasn't barking in warning. He was looking at me with calm, thankful eyes. I repeated the words again, louder. "It's okay. You're safe now. Go home." The children waved one last time, that same slow wave. Then all 3 figures began to fade, becoming transparent under the moonlight. The cold lifted. The smell disappeared. The basement lights inside the house flickered once and returned to normal. I stood there crying like a child until sunrise. For 3 weeks afterward, everything was quiet. No 3:21 a.m. wake-ups, no scratching, no barking, no handprints on impossible windows. I started sleeping through the night again. I even adopted a real golden retriever puppy from a shelter and named him Sunny. Life felt normal. But last night, something happened. I woke up at exactly 3:21 a.m., not from fear, but from a gentle warmth in the room. At the foot of my bed sat Bailey, fully solid, glowing softly. He wasn't translucent anymore. He looked like a real, healthy dog. Beside him stood Emily and Lucas, holding hands, smiling peacefully. They weren't pale or hollow-eyed. They looked like normal, happy children. Bailey walked forward, licked my hand once, and wagged his tail. The children whispered together, "Thank you for opening the door." Then all three of them slowly dissolved into golden light that floated upward and vanished through the ceiling. I haven't seen them since. Sometimes, very late at night, I still hear faint barking in the distance, but now it sounds different, like playful, not desperate, like a dog running free with two children in some place far better than here. I don't know if they're finally at peace, or if they simply moved on to someone else who needs protection. All I know is that some doors should never be opened, and some doors must be opened so that others can finally close. If you ever hear frantic barking at 3:21 a.m. or soft children's voices asking to come inside, think carefully before you answer, because sometimes the thing trying to get in isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to get out.